I'm honored and humbled, of course, to follow that magnificent tribute to William, and I feel like it's my job to drag everybody into the abyss of decadence. It's the source material for the novels I write and for the newspaper columns I still write. I had a little Q&A session earlier, and somebody asked me about the Florida man phenomenon on the internet, the hashtag Florida man, and I feel some copyright infringement because I was writing about these knuckleheads for 4 decades, and now the rest of the country. And usually when you wrote those Florida stories, you wrote them for a maximum impact of perversity and disgust that you want. Now it's like a happy trend. There's another sick story from Florida. So I always, they always ask you for a title for these speeches. Well, I don't know if this is the same one. I always hear 2008, I think I had a different one then, but I always say the case against intelligent design because Florida is cutting edge, and I believe that that we're all witnessing the de-evolution of the human species, and I believe that it's starting in my home state, and I'll just give you some personal examples of this. And I always say these things are never going to end up in a novel because I can't improve upon them satirically, but they might. A dear friend of mine who was a fishing guide passed away not long ago, and he was cremated. He was a crusty old guy. He didn't believe in anything, but he was cremated, and his family wanted to scatter the ashes out on Biscayne Bay, where he had spent 50 or 60 years as a bonefish guide. And they were planning to go out, and it was really windy that day, and they had small boats, and they couldn't get across the bay, so they postponed the ashes ceremony until the next day. So some member of the family just said, well, I'll take Bill, the urn, and I'll take him home with me, and I'll see you back at the dock in the morning. So he decides to stop at what you would think would be a harmless, detour. He stopped at an Irish bar in Coral Gables. And he went in to have a little cocktail, some beer or something, and he left Bill on the front seat. And he came out of the bar. I don't know what the time frame was, probably not 5 minutes later, maybe a little longer in the bar, but he came out and the window of the car was broken. And also on the front seat was a laptop computer and a Nikon camera, which you're not criminals, but I can assure you they have some retail pawn value, more than an ash, an urn full of ashes. The only thing that the crooks took was Bill. If he's looking down, he's going to laugh at this story. And not only that, it wasn't like an unmarked container. It had the name of the funeral home on the thing. That's the only thing this knucklehead took. So I'm trying to envision in my mind, the New York Times called me up and said, we're working on this story, and I may have said too much. I said, somewhere in an alley in Coral Gables, Coconut Grove, there's a complete idiot who has snorted up my friend Bill. Bad things happen to famous people who come to Florida. And I just will go, Bernie Madoff, Tiger Woods, we don't need to go into the golf club incident. Elliot Spitzer from New York. And here's the problem. If you're going to have an escort, if you're using an escort service and you're going to a place like South Florida, and you're a prominent public figure in the state of New York, you really don't want them talking about you afterwards. And the reason that he got caught was because the escorts, whom he was paying, remembered Oh, that's the little guy that never used to take off his black socks. Oh, if you're going to get caught up in a sex scandal, that's not what you want to be remembered for. David Petraeus, one of the most decorated military leaders of my time, my generation, who comes off a splendid career, and he goes to Florida, down to the Southcom headquarters on the West Coast, and immediately gets into some trouble. Has a friend who is writing a book, and if she's here today, sorry about this, but so he get that scandal to David. The scandal takes down David Petraeus, but I have to, and I always tell people, this is the first time, and I haven't grown up in Florida, where I ever saw these two words together in a newspaper article or a headline. It's the term Tampa socialite. Everybody in Florida found that hilarious, except General Petraeus. Now the latest, of course, and if any of you are Patriots fans, just brace yourself. But so Robert Kraft, who's worth $1 zillion, he's got homes in Palm Beach and everywhere. So he decides that he's going to visit an Asian massage parlor about quite a distance from his residence. And he's decided, though, that he's going to do this fairly anonymously. So he gets the idea, and he's going 2 days in a row, including the same day he's got to fly to Kansas City to watch his team play in the AFC Championship game. The same day, he's making a detour to a strip mall in western Palm Beach County to get a massage. So, but now here's my advice if any of you get this idea in your head. First of all, he was going to be so clever that on the Friday he went in the white chauffeured Bentley. The following day, he threw everybody off by showing up in the blue chauffeur Bentley. So, again, this is the kind of thing that you couldn't possibly put it into a novel and have any editor say, nobody's going to believe that this guy would do this. So now there's a huge legal battle going on, of course, for the videotapes. The police had the massage parlor, with video cameras. And I had written a column, and I'm all for the First Amendment, and I'm all for releasing public information, and I'm all for open court systems. Florida has always sort of led the country in that. But I just begged in this column, I begged the judge, please do not release the Bob Kraft video. I said, this nation has been through enough. It's time to heal and move on. And it's still being fought in the court system down there. But it recalled another famous person who came to South Florida and got some trouble. There's a musician named Justin Bieber. You might have heard of him. And he was in South Florida, and he and his buddy had rented some Lamborghinis or Ferraris one night, and they decided to do a street race on Miami Beach, on a street in Miami Beach. And they drew some attention to themselves, and they were stopped by the Miami Beach police. And Mr. Bieber was perhaps a little aggressive in his response to questioning, and also there was a sense that he might not have been entirely sober. So they took him to the Miami Beach Police Department, which has a very modern, cameras everywhere in it, and they asked him if he would mind. He had said some things to the officers that the officers had taken personally. So they they decided they were going to make him pee in a cup. And for whatever reason, they have cameras in every corner of this. And so, and he said sure, and he's wearing his hoodie, and he's, doing the slouch. But he realizes he's in a degree of trouble, I think. So anyway, there's this, the videotape that's ultimately released, he goes to pee in a cup. Now, when all this happened, and he was going to fight these charges, and I think he may have had some marijuana in his system, possibly some alcohol. Anyway, he was going to fight all this stuff, and there was a big court battle. And I'm very proud. The Miami Herald got involved with our attorneys. We felt that this was a cause, this was a constitutional issue that. Since the taxpayers of Florida paid for the police department's facilities and this was evidentiary, that we believe we ought to have access. And we were joined by numerous news organizations that were trying to get hold of what became known as the Justin Bieber P tape. That was what it was. And many high-priced lawyers were involved in this battle. And it came down ultimately to a compromise. The judge said, look, we have to release some of it. And we came back to a compromise that we can obscure, you're allowed to obscure a certain part of Mr. Bieber's anatomy. And you can obscure it with it was a little rectangular black box thing, so that they like paste it on the videotape. And then the next battle became the size of the box. I believe our attorneys took the position that the only thing that should be obscured is absolutely, meticulously what's necessary to and I believe Mr. Bieber's attorneys took the position that we believe there might be a larger box that would be more appropriate. So in the end, the problem is I cannot attest to whether the size of the box has any relation to what was, in case you're a fan, to what was being covered up. And so now it was no surprise now that that our favorite winter resident of Palm Beach, Florida, is in the White House, and because it's just we knew. We braced for this stuff in Florida. We knew that if for no other reason, that fate would deal the cards in a way that we now have that little circus going on in Palm Beach. And for writers of comedy, humor, satire, columns, it's been a godsend. I mean, for the democracy, not so much, but for the rest of us. I'll just give you, so we're the only, and there are so many books being written now about this presidency and about this president. We'll never catch up with all the good stuff. But he's found a home. I mean, he fits in. Because, listen, Florida is the only state in the union that I know of where one of our former Supreme Court justices quit from the bench and turned to marijuana smuggling as his occupation. And he died a federal fugitive. Apparently much wealthier than he was as a Supreme Court justice. It's the only state where we had an attorney general, and this just happened, I think, last year or 2 years ago. She postponed a scheduled execution so she could attend a political fundraiser. Now, I'm not going to get into the death penalty argument right here, but I will put forward the idea that if you're the individual who is up for execution, and they've already brought you your last meal, you've sort of signed your deal, you've sort of spoken to whatever higher power, and you had the last meal, and you're ready to head to the lethal injection chamber, and they say, hey, we've got good news and bad news. The good news is the Attorney General can't be here, so you don't get executed today. The bad news is she'll be back tomorrow. So you get 2 last meals. We're the Medicare fraud capital of the United States. This is true. The identity fraud capital of the United States and the mortgage fraud capital of the United States. And we are proud of all those titles. We are able year to year to uphold those. We have the most active public prosecution unit in the federal court systems because the corruption is so prevalent. There was one time not too long ago where in the space of 2 weeks we had 3 separate mayors indicted for corruption, non-related charges, non-related cases. They just happened to screw up all the same week. And that's pretty good, 3 mayors in a week. We have, of course, Disney. Now, Disney I'm not their favorite person. I wrote a it was a nonfiction book, but it was sort of a screed about what Disney had done to Florida, and that was called Team Rodent, and it was a hard book to find in Orlando, by the way. It wasn't. But I had to be honest, and I talked about things that happened in Disney World. And so you should know, because if you haven't been there, and you're a parent, you will have to go there. In Florida, if you don't take your kids to Disney World, the Department of Family and Children comes to your house and takes your kids away. So you have to. It's right there. But anyway, there's great stories that come out of Disney World. Both Tigger and Donald Duck have been criminally charged at different times with groping tourists at Disney World. Yeah. Both incidents occurred during photo sessions where, people ran up to the characters and wanted to pose, and the allegation was that they got a little handsy. Now, the case against Donald Duck was settled before it went to court. Tigger, however, proclaimed his innocence. The guy who was playing Tigger, he was defiantly, so he was going to trial. And so the Tigger trial was a big deal in Orlando. And so he came in, he had no priors. Tigger had a completely clean rap sheet. And his defense lawyer, first of all, Disney tried to get the actual Tigger costume removed from the courtroom because they didn't want to mess with the brand. They wanted a faux Tigger. So there was a big legal battle, and the judge says, no, we have to see what he was wearing during the alleged crime. So they bring in, they have the Tigger outfit, and his lawyer he's got an ingenious defense lawyer. And it's almost like the big Johnny Cochran move in the OJ case, because the defense lawyer says, this costume is designed in a way that it makes the paws make actual groping impossible. They're not constructed in a way that any individual finger movement can occur. And so there's a demonstration in the courtroom of what you can and can't do in a Tigger costume. And Tigger walks. Boom. Tigger's. But listen, I always want to be more current, so I want to tell you, because I'm going to steal my friend's Dave Barry's line that you can't make this stuff. This is just from the last couple of days, last couple of weeks of the Miami Herald. And how am I doing? Well, I'm time. Anyway, this occurred in the Jacksonville area. A woman, this is the headline. Florida woman drunkenly bites man's fishing line, swims away with his lure, police say. This is it. She jumped off a pier where they were fishing, and she swam. You'll be shocked to know they were acquaintances, and there'd been some domestic issues. She grabbed his fishing line. She bites the line. She has now a lure with treble hooks and everything, and she swims to shore. And at some point, she feels the obligation to disrobe. So a scene that's already bad gets much worse. She's charged with public intoxication. This just happened. This is another one that I wish I had thought of in a novel before it happened. But a woman was stopped during a routine traffic stop by a Florida sheriff's deputy in Charlotte County, Florida, which is on the West Coast. And the deputy keenly sensed that something was wrong, And he said, do you have anything on your person right now that I should know about? And she reached into her yoga pants and pulled out a live alligator, baby alligator about 1 foot long, in her yoga pants. This is one of those stories that'll, yeah. There's the gator, seen in happier times. But this is one of those stories that will make you sleep with the lights on for about 2 weeks afterwards. That happened. Oh, this is horrible. Well, no. Yeah, because there's kids here. Is there? I don't want to say that. This is a headline, though, so it's you got to get. You might as well hear it if you're. Oh God, Miami Herald. This was just a couple months ago. Man admits having sex with miniature horse, cops say, but he played it safe. Yes. He was arrested. He admitted to have developed a fondness for the horse. They had its own Facebook page. Don't look it up now. Jackie G was the name of the miniature horse. And a woman, his neighbor, called up and said she had seen him in a pasture having an intimate relationship with the horse, and that she had talked to him about it and said he admitted it, and it wasn't the first time, and he intended to continue. The police came out, and he said, I don't know what the problem is. I'm using a condom. Well, I don't know what the problem is either. But this leads me to down another dark road that I haven't been able to get into. I'm not going to use that story in any novel. But we had a case a few years ago, and it became a celebrated case because it turned out there was no law against it. There was a guy up in a place called Mossy Head, Florida, which is in the Panhandle, the Florida Panhandle. And this guy decided that he wanted to have a date with a neighbor's pet goat. And the goat belonged to a girl in town who was very popular. The goat itself apparently had a following of some kind. Anyway, the man, one night, he took the goat on his date over to his place, and the goat passed away during rough foreplay. I don't know if any of you have any normal experiences with goat, but a goat is not an easy. Goats are pretty damn tough. So the family found this out, and they went to the police and said, "You got to arrest this guy for what he did to the goat." And they said, "Well, we went through the laws, and the only thing we can get him on is a misdemeanor, animal cruelty. There's no law against dating livestock in the state of Florida." So this is a very conservative area. This is solid Trump country, the Pensacola areas. Trust me, that whole panhandle. So they went to the legislature, and they said, "We need a statute." I also should mention this was not the first offense of this individual, the goat dater. He was a serial goat dater. And so they go to the Florida legislature, and it takes 7 years to get a law passed that specifically addresses the idea, and not just goats, but any four-legged beast. You cannot. And in the course of all the debate that goes on, a representative from Miami stands up and says, "I don't understand what this is." I mean, she says, are there a law already on the books about this? Was this what they call animal husbandry? True. All right. We'll move on to something. Here's a typical 4-paragraph item in the Miami Herald. Dolphins quarterback's wife leaves rifle in rental car. So this was Ryan Tannehill's wife. He's no longer with the Dolphins, but she rented, his wife went to the Fort Lauderdale airport and decided to rent a car for some reason for the day. She only used it for a day. She brought it back. They didn't clean it or look in the trunk or whatever, and they rented it out to some very nice tourist, a female tourist who was driving around. Every time she turned a corner, she'd hear this thing flying and something banging around in the trunk of her car. And so she stops and she looks in the trunk of the car, and it's an AR-15 assault rifle. And she thinks, Hertz has really stepped up its game here. All I wanted was a GPS. But maybe this is the new deal in South Florida. This is it, if you were going to rent a car. So when she turns the car in, it was, by the way, the company is Easy Rental Car if you're looking for it. And they said, that is not our assault rifle. Believe me, we didn't get you for that, and you're not going to be charged for the assault rifle. So they contact Mrs. Tannehill, who says, oh God, yeah, I left my AR-15 in the trunk. I'm so sorry. Just another something to forget. Yes, the bag from Macy's and the AR-15. I'm so sorry. So this is the best. No charges are expected to be filed. A Miami Dolphins spokesman says the Tannehills view this as a personal matter. I wonder what that discussion was like at the Tannehills. I don't blame the Kardashians for everything that's happened to the country, but I do blame them for a phenomenon that is occurring. And in Miami, there's an epidemic of this, and there's been some, and I don't want to make light of it because there have been some tragic cases and some people died, but I do have to trace it directly to the Kardashians. In Miami now, it's a huge business. People fly from all over the country, South America, Central America, even from places, like in the Northeast in this country, to go to Miami to get, this is the thing. Apparently at some point that I missed in this whole cultural swirl, it's apparently now a fashionable thing to have a gigantic ass. That's apparently that's a thing. So these doctors in Miami have opened up clinics for buttocks enhancement. And formerly these clinics were called Burger Kings.